Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hi, I'm Rory, and with me as always is Ken. How are you doing, Ken?
I'm well. I'm grateful to be here. Rory and I are grateful that you have joined us here today for 180. That's the episode number of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. We have 3 sections we're going to be delving into today, starting off with our student check-in, where we look at something that a student might come across within their training, and we're going to be speaking about something that I think's got broad appeal here for our qualified friends as well, and that is idiosyncratic empathy. Can be a tricky one, that. I'm looking forward to chatting about that. We then go into our Digital Counselling Revolution, where we recognize that technology forms part of how therapy is delivered and how therapy is now consumed by our clients. And today we have a very special interview where we speak with the ACTO chairperson, Mr. Adrian Rhodes. So something to look forward to there. And then we go into practice matters with Karen Griffith, who is going to be speaking about the teenage brain. And I have a teenage daughter myself, so that's something I'm really looking forward to hearing about so that I can try and understand. So starting us off at that student check-in, idiosyncratic empathy. Even the word, Rory, sends shivers down my spine when I was a student.
I know, it's a bit of a mouthful. And for those of you students who are maybe doing your skills tapes, you could be doing a certificate or a diploma, maybe doing your advanced level skills at university. Idiosyncratic empathy is one of the reasons where a lot of people get their assignments referred. And one of the words or phrases that tutors use is not being with the clients, and it completely flummoxes a lot of people. I'm listening, you're thinking to yourself, I'm really listening to the client and reflecting and paraphrasing, and my tutor's saying I'm not being with the client. Idiosyncratic empathy is where you're absolutely tuned in to the clients, and I think it's the difference between rescuing and actually hearing the clients. Now, a good example of that is, say, for instance, you have a client who says to you, when I look at me, I feel really fat. Some people are really kind and they say, but you're a beautiful person. I see a beautiful person in front of me. Actually, that isn't hearing the client, that's rescuing. And I'm reflecting back something along the lines of what I'm hearing you say is that when you look in the mirror, you feel fat, you see a person, maybe that you don't recognize, if that was part of what was said. That is being with the client. That is understanding the client. That is their words validated. And it was an idea, idiosyncratic empathy was an idea that's really coined by Gerald Bozarth, who's a huge influence in the world of person-centered therapy. In fact, he wrote a book, Person-Centered Therapy, a revolutionary paradigm, which is probably in every university library. But idiosyncratic empathy is just so important. And I know, Ken, you are someone who's really interested in counselling skills. What's your take on idiosyncratic empathy?
It's an interesting topic for me, and I wrote about it in my book, Basic Counselling Skills, a Student Guide. If you're interested in that book, it is available through Amazon. And for me, there's 2 words here, idiosyncratic and empathy. And when we break it up and look at the 2 words separated, first of all, we speak about empathy. That's walking in the client's shoes. That's being in the client's frame of reference, understanding what the client is experiencing from their perspective, trying to kind of put yourself in the picture. So there we're talking about empathy. And then the other word is the idiosyncratic. And to be honest, when I started my studies, I didn't know what idiosyncratic meant. I had to go and look it up. And the actual meaning of the word idiosyncratic is the clue to idiosyncratic empathy. And the meaning of idiosyncratic is particular or individual. And it means that it is a particular kind of empathy or an individual kind of empathy for that specific client. Now, it may be that you will work with one particular client and your empathy responses will be of a certain nature. That is what comes up when working with that client. But working with a different client, even with a similar presentation, your empathy responses may differ. And that is idiosyncratic behavior. In other words, you are mapping and matching to who that client is as an individual. And it will be different with different clients in different relationships. So as Rory has said, it is the sharpest form of empathy because it is mapped to that individual person. So if we think about counseling skills, you'd kind of follow the formula of what a reflection is, what a paraphrase is, but within that, it is going to be idiosyncratic. It is going to change depending on who the person is in front of you. And with it being mapped to that person, we're not merely parroting out or repeating back empty words. When it is idiosyncratic, it is to that person individually, who they are. It is particular to them. And that is kind of my understanding of idiosyncratic empathy. So there's the idiosyncratic of that, very individualistic to that person. And I guess when we look at our lives, we may find that we are idiosyncratic in many different ways. When you go into work, you may act and behave as one kind of person. It doesn't change who you are as a core person, but you've got your way of being in work, and it is idiosyncratic. It may well be very different if you're with your group of friends, and it may be very different if you're with your partner or with your children, and that is idiosyncratic action, I guess. What being able to see it, we can find ourselves being slightly different when we are with different people. It doesn't mean that we're not being true to ourselves. We have the ability as humans to be idiosyncratic. And then when we focus on the empathy side of things, so we understand empathy of understanding the client, who they are. But empathy's a full circle. It's not just a starting point. It's not just a thing we do. Empathy is only effective if the client feels they're being understood, if they feel we get it, and they can actually see that within ourselves. And the example I like to use is if you went and watched a film. We can experience empathy while watching a film. We can watch the hero and get excited and feel a sense of pride because they're winning. We can be moved to tears when watching a film, and we're experiencing an empathic response. However, it's useless because the person within the film is unable to perceive that. And empathy, if it only sits within you, doesn't do its full job. So the empathy needs to go full circle, that the client understands they're being heard, they're being understood, not only with empathy, but idiosyncratic empathy, truly unique to who they are. You're not just parroting back, that they really feel you get them. When you crack that, you've cracked idiosyncratic empathy.
I don't know what to say about that, Ken. I think that sums it up in a nutshell. And to be honest, how do you follow that? I'd take your point, Ken, that it is made to measure empathy. Every single client we meet on our practice journey, whether you're a student or whether you're a qualified colleague, every single person who sits in the chair in front of you is a different person, and they deserve to be treated as a different person. And I think that, you know, if you're using what I would call off-the-shelf empathy, where you say things like, I hear that you're having difficulties, that must be difficult, and I can see that you're upset about that. That's off-the-shelf empathy, where you're actually listening to that person, seeing that person, the person sat right in front of you, and you reflect back exactly what the client has said to you. That is made to measure empathy. That is literally like you're the tailor and you're measuring the clients up and you're sending back something that fits them exactly. And it takes a lot of skill to do. And one of the things in my experience of teaching students is that a lot of people who come to counselling, in fact, all people who come to counselling, tend to want to help people, and they're underlyingly kind. And sometimes they don't want to reflect back the, shall we say, the ugliness of what clients see about themselves. They don't want, in the term of clients, I'm feeling really, really, really fat. It might be the therapist thinks that's an ugly perception and doesn't want to reflect that back, doesn't want to add to the hurt, but actually by just saying something off the shelf, such as, well, you're a beautiful person and, you got lovely eyes or something like that. You're not doing the client justice. The client is not being heard. And sometimes I think using idiosyncratic empathy takes a little bit of courage, Ken.
Yeah, definitely. And true alignment to who that person is that sits in front of you. You mentioned, Rory, that this is kind of taking it a little deeper. And idiosyncratic empathy, or empathy itself, is not in itself a skill. It is one of the conditions. It is something we are. It's not something we do. It is who we are. And it does need exercising. And when we look at our skills, and I'm just going to take now a reflection. So a true reflection, defined in a textbook, would be that the client says a sentence, and from that sentence, the counsellor may pick out what the feeling words are and reflect them back and use the exact same words that the client was using. So the client may say, I'm going to use your example, when I look in the mirror, I feel that I'm fat and I'm not happy with my life. And you may look at fat and I'm not happy with my life. Now, I'm choosing, it's a reflection. It's the exact words that the client brought, and it's pulling out the essence. So I'm not changing it. I'm not adapting the words. I'm not giving my interpretation. I'm using the exact words that the client mentioned. And that is a reflection. And it is thought, and when you kind of look at it, well, surely that's off the shelf because you're just saying their words back. How can that be idiosyncratic? How can that be different from one person to another person? And what makes it idiosyncratic is when you reflect back, you would be reflecting back maybe the posture that you are seeing. How does the client sit? If their shoulders are all folded up as they say it, maybe you would fold your shoulders up. If their face grimaces as they say the words, when you repeat them back, you might also grimace. You will mirror the whole of that person in front of you, not just the words. You are really being them, showing them you really truly get it. And that's how a off-the-shelf reflection can be made idiosyncratic. And that's what makes it, I guess, advanced in terms of your skill usage. At the lower levels, you'll map your skill usage to empathy, and you'll kind of be measured on that, maybe with the Kharkov rating scales. When you start working with idiosyncratic empathy, you're probably in your final years of counseling study, probably in practice, and most certainly going to supervision. And idiosyncratic empathy is a wonderful thing to take into supervision. If you're working with your supervisor, you can share, I felt differently when I was working with this client to this client. And I remember when I first took that into supervision, I almost felt that I was doing it wrong. How could I feel different with one client to another client? But of course I'm going to feel different because I'm picking up on their feelings that are unique to them. It's about them, not about me.
Absolutely. And it is, as Ken said, it is a two-way street. You feel it. Empathy is a conduit. So you feel, you may feel what they're feeling. And by going to supervision, you can look at that. You can kind of rest it off. If you're carrying the heavy weight of a client's material, you can take that to supervision, and that may help lighten the load. And you're absolutely right, Ken. It's one of those skills that is developed later on in training, usually towards the end, when people are working with real clients, not just face-to-face in skills practice. And I think it's tuned up by the supervisor. I think as a supervisor, sometimes I'll be saying to my supervisees, just think about what you said to that client. How might that client have received it? And it is all about, at the end of the day, the client's frame of reference, trying to really step in to their frame of reference. And you know what else, Ken? This is a question that gets asked a lot in our Facebook group. It comes up time and time again. Certainly when students are doing their advanced counselling skills. And if you don't know what our Facebook group is, a quick plug for our Facebook group. Go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor. You'll find us. We're a closed group. Knock on the door. We're a friendly bunch. of people. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of people in our Facebook group. Some are students, some are qualified colleagues, supervisors. We have a soup song of tutors who come in and share their wisdom. So come on in and ask your questions. But as I say, Ken, idiosyncratic empathy in general and idiosyncratic empathy is something that comes up time and time again, because as I said, it's being with the client, it's in their frame of reference, it's walking in their shoes.
Indeed it is. A couple of resources for you if you're interested. My book does contain a chapter on idiosyncratic empathy. You can get that on Amazon. Just go onto Amazon and search Basic Counselling Skills, a Student Guide by Ken Kelly. That is there. And of course, we have a paid for resources. It's the paid for part of Counselling Tutor. Of course, this podcast is free. Resources on our website are free. But those that are looking for additional support, we've created a library of resources and lectures for students. It's called the Counselling Study Resources. We've got a section in there that I kind of focused on, all about skills. The skills section. Rory built the theory section. I really worked on the skills section, and I've covered all the skills in depth. Not only do we show the skills, explain the skills as you might read them in a textbook, but also where appropriate, you can hear examples of those skills being used in a simulated session where you've got the client presentation, the use of the skill, and then we kind of break down what was done, how it was done, what the benefits were for the counsellor and for the client, and we kind of go over that. So that is Counselling Study Resource, and if you're interested in joining that, go to counsellingtutor.com. All the information is there. So kind of backing out of our student check-in into our digital counselling revolution, and today we have a guest, and we're going to be Rory met up with Adrian Rhodes, and Adrian Rhodes is the chairperson for the Association for Counselling and Therapy Online, or the abbreviation for that is ACTO. So I think without any further ado, straight into Digital Counselling Revolution.
Digital Counselling Revolution.
So we welcome Adrian Rhodes from ACTO, the Association of Counselling and Therapy Online. Thank you so much for joining us today, Adrian. We're really, really grateful.
It's an absolute pleasure. It's always good to talk about ACTO and online therapy.
It is, and that really brings me on to my first question, Adrian. ACTO is an organisation that supports online therapists. Can you tell me maybe a little bit about the organisation and why it was founded?
Yeah, it came into existence in 2006, I believe. And it was really therapists who were practicing online. This is almost back in the Middle Ages in terms of online therapy now. And also people who were starting to teach and include teaching about online work in their teaching. And they came together to create ACTO. And the purpose of it is to take the online therapy scene seriously, and to remember that working online is both the same as face-to-face and different from face-to-face therapy. And to do it well requires proper thought, proper training. And that's what ACTO has been about ever since. We have a register of therapists who have trained and whose practice we know something about. And we have supervisors as well. But we're there to educate and to increase standards in online therapy.
Yes, and you're absolutely right. The COVID-19 epidemic, we're recording this in the January of 2021, and we're still in the midst of COVID, has increased the interest in online and telephone counselling. Have you seen an increase in interest, people contacting you, coming onto your website, enrolling on courses?
Yes, we've had a huge increase in people coming to ACTO since about May or June last year, when people started to come online, and a lot of people did the responsible thing in realizing that it wasn't quite as easy as it seemed, and undertook further training and sought further training. And organizations too have been coming to us, sometimes to join, sometimes just to ask for guidance in what online therapy is about. And we're always having individuals and organizations asking us for advice. We've had more and more training organizations join us, yes, our profile and the work involved has rocketed hugely since March.
Yes, and I think you've made a very, very good point there about training, because to the uninformed, shall we say, there could be a temptation to say, well, it's probably the same as working in the room, or face to face, as it's sometimes called. How different can it be? The client is there, I'm there. The only difference is that we're working maybe through a phone or through a video connection, like myself and Adrian are connecting today. But it is widely different. There's a lot of things to be taken into consideration, isn't there?
Well, yes, there is, and you're quite right. It is the same in some ways, and yet the problems are different as well. I mean, take, for example, how you meet online. There's a real difference between someone coming and knocking at your door, or coming to the office and entering the room and sitting with you, and working online. And how does that all work? There's a really famous quote in the online world where a client once said to a therapist, when I'm in the room with you, I can either kiss you or kill you, but I can't do that online. And that's true. And there's a lot of anxiety about what is called presence, the loss of presence, that sort of magnetism of being in the room with someone. And that is a real loss in online work. On the other hand, there is the potential for great intimacy too online, in a way that you don't necessarily get in face-to-face work. The research shows that online work is much better for some clients than for others, much better than face-to-face work for some conditions and some sorts of people. So, then you take into account all the ethical issues and the legal issues of working abroad, and the whole thing becomes really quite problematic once you start looking into it.
Yes, and as you say, this is quite. It's not a new. Online and telephone counselling isn't a new phenomenon by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a rapidly growing phenomena. It's grown rapidly, and I like the quote, Adrian. I'm not sure I'd like to be killed or kissed by a client, to be honest, but I take the sentiment, the lack of, the perceived lack of presence could be an issue. I'm just curious. I wonder what presentations suit online and telephone counselling the most.
There's quite a bit of evidence that where issues of shame are prominent, that people prefer to work online. So sometimes, often it's people with eating disorders, body dysmorphic disorders, anything to do with issues of shame like that, where people find the distancing allows them to have intimacy. Personally, I've also found, and maybe this is working as a male therapist, that people who have experience of childhood sexual abuse sometimes work better online. Again, it's this thing of being safe by not being in the same room as a therapist, and yet it does give that secure and personal relationship, and does give an opportunity for people to explore things online that they've not been able to do face to face.
Yes, I think that's a really useful observation, and certainly in the latter, a sense of protection. The fact that you're not in the room with somebody, you're actually in the space you can control. I would imagine for some survivors of sexual abuse must be comforting and really, really useful. I also think that one of the things that ACTO is really good at is research. You've spoken about research, and the website. We'll put the website to ACTO in the show notes on the page. You've got a lot of research articles. It's quite a lot to look at the ACTO website, isn't there?
Well, I hope so, and we are hopefully going to have a new website in the next perhaps 2 or 3 months. That's something we want to do. We realise that currently our website has sort of grown a bit like Topsy, and it's a bit confusing, and it's not quite what an online therapy organisation ought to be showcasing. So we're revising that. So please bear with us. But one of the things that we are keen on developing is our R&D, research and development bit, and we have a director for that within ACTO. And certainly I want us to, I want it over time to become the go-to place above everywhere else for information, so that we can harvest material from research and books, book articles, and just bring stuff together so that people can dip into it and find the information they require. So we're beginning something that's really quite important, I believe.
Yeah, it sounds to me like as an organisation that's specialising in effectively one delivery of therapy, that you're putting all the resources together. It's a go-to place for practitioners, could be qualified counsellors, could be student counsellors, to go and get some information. Now ACTO has a number of membership levels that you can join. Do you want to just explore what those levels are and what they mean?
Yes, ACTO has long had a professional membership, which is for people who have had quite a lot of training online and whose work has been assessed. But we realised soon after lockdown, soon after coronavirus started, that in fact there were an awful lot of therapists who had, as I said earlier, been really responsible in looking for training, looking for courses to help them understand the online world, and that was a great thing. And yet they've gone through training or collected a portfolio of trainings, which amounted to quite a lot of work, which needed to be recognised, but whose work we couldn't particularly say that we had seen. So we brought in an entry-level membership, an ACTO member level, which we call level 1, but ACTO member level, and that is a full membership of ACTO, and that's fine. Then our professional membership is roughly what we always have. We tend to call that level 2 when we're being lazy. And therefore, logically, we have a level 3, which is a senior professional member of ACTO. And this is for people who've done really quite considerable amounts of training courses that are well over 200 hours, 300 hours, and perhaps have done or have done research or are prominent in other ways, supervisors in online therapy. So we have that level for those who are fairly senior within the profession. We also, of course, have student membership, as you said earlier, which allows access to everything in ACTO, apart from one or two specialist things like using CoreNet, which is a particular benefit for registered members.
Yes, for things like assessment and assessing clients and that type of thing.
Well, CoreNet is actually more than that. I mean, some people will be very knowledgeable about using Core as a paper-based measure. And yes, it's used for assessment, but also it's used continually through the therapy. And CoreNet is a particular benefit for members of ACTO who've been through the training. We have a license from Core. No one else has this, which allows an online version of CoreNet, which you can use weekly with your clients, either Core 34 or Core 10, and share that with your clients so they can see their progress week by week. It's an excellent benefit of being a member of ACTO.
Well, I think that I will again just mention, if you're interested in the ACTO website, if you go to counsellingtutor.com, if you click on the podcast tab, if you click on the podcast 180, we will put ACTO's web address in. You can click on that and you can see all those wonderful things. Thank you so much for just taking the time out of your busy schedule to speak with us. And Adrian, thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Adrian Rhodes from ACTO, and thank you, Rory, for taking the time to meet up and kind of get the information. We recognize things have changed so much, and we need somewhere to look, I guess, and an ethical organization to belong to. And it's good to know that online and telephone counseling is being cared for.
Absolutely. And as I said, I thoroughly enjoyed talking to Adrian. He's a man of huge knowledge on this subject. And you're absolutely right, Ken. In this changing world of moving from in the room to online counselling, having an organisation that just focuses on the online aspects, I think is a really, really good idea. And again, we thank Adrian for his observations and certainly that valuable information.
Indeed. And if you're interested in the online and telephone counselling course offered by Counselling Tutor, we are, as you now know, an ACTO approved training provider offering training for ACTO Level 1 and ACTO Level 2 professional membership. You can get more information by just going to our website, counsellingtutor.com. Everything is there. And we now move on to Practice Matters, where we recognize that we bring information for our qualified practitioner friends, things that you might come across within your practice that may present themselves within your therapy room. We're looking to sharpen our competencies, and we're certainly going to be doing that today because Rory met up with Karen Griffiths to speak about understanding the teenage brain.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. And I think that our attitudes towards younger people are shifting dramatically. Speaking to a colleague the other day, she was saying to me that they don't use challenging behaviour as a term now. They use the term distressing behaviour because there's an understanding that if a child is acting out, that really they're going through some form of trauma. There's something that they're struggling with, and by coming at it from a place as we discussed in the podcast of empathy, trying to find out what's going on for them and trying to understand their world, we're best able to help them and help them manage their behaviour. I caught up with Karen Griffiths, who's done a lot of research on the teenage brain, and she shared the if you like the secrets of teenage brains and the kind of behaviours that may present and how we may manage them.
Practice Matters.
And we welcome Karen Griffiths, who has given a fabulous lecture on the teenage brain. And I think that if you are maybe a school counsellor or you work with young people, I think this is going to definitely be a lecture for you. So why is it important that we understand the teenage brain? What is the benefit of understanding how teenagers think, I guess, or their processes?
Well, I think we've all been teenagers, or most of us, at that age where we've been teenagers, and it isn't an easy time. We all know of teenagers that can be quite challenging. Some behaviours are very difficult, and I think it's very, very important to understand actually what's going on for the teenagers. It's a tough time. There's a lot going on in the body, both from the hormone point of view. There's all sorts of surges in different types of hormones running around the body, but there's also an awful lot going on in the teenage brain. And I personally didn't realize that until I listened to a lecture given a few years ago by a Swedish psychologist. And it just sort of switched on quite a few lights for me, because I at the time I was working with teenagers, and I also had teenagers of my own. And it actually really helped me understand what was going on in their brains. And it definitely helped me become more empathetic and more tolerant and understanding of their behaviours. So for me, it was extremely helpful, and I have given this talk on several occasions, and I have always had a very positive response from the audience, because I think it resonates with a lot of people, whether you're actually working with teenagers or also if you have teenagers of your own. I think it definitely helps to understand what's going on.
Yes, absolutely. I can still remember when I was a teenager. It was a long time ago, but I can still remember, and I do wonder where my thinking was at some parts, and
Yeah.
of course that is because some parts of the brains aren't developed in teenagers; they're developing and forming. What kind of parts of the brain and how does it influence behaviour? So I guess my question is, what parts of the brain are under development and how might that impact or display kind of distressing behaviours?
Yeah. Well, it used to be thought that the brain was fully developed by really the age of 5 or 6. And it's only fairly recently, over the last couple of decades, that more and more research has been done and more is being found out about brain development. And we now know that the brain isn't fully developed until somebody is really into their mid-20s. And a lot of that development will go on during the adolescent teenage phase. We know that the brain develops from the back of the brain to the front of the brain. And it's the front of the brain which is really, it's known as the sort of social center of the brain. It's where all the thinking goes on. It's where judgments take place. It's where perceptions of other people's feelings and thoughts happen. And we know now that that is the last area of the brain to be fully formed.
Yes, and is it true that male brains take longer to form to maturity? Is there any truth in that? I've heard this discussed by colleagues.
I'm not absolutely sure if there's any hard evidence for that, but we do know that puberty generally takes place later in boys than girls. So girls do mature more quickly, and everything happens maybe a couple of years later in boys. So we do know that, but I'm not absolutely sure if there's any hard evidence for that.
Oh, okay.
Maybe.
Maybe. Well, maybe that will appear. I don't want to be prejudiced against the males or boys here, but I do hear therapists speak anecdotally that there is some research, but as we don't know, it doesn't really matter. And I think I'm really interested in that we've always talked or generally talked about disruptive behaviour. And challenging behaviour, and the vocabulary seems to be changing now to distress behaviour. The idea that when someone acts out, they're not being challenging; it's actually a form of distress that they're going through. That their cognitive processes can't handle the situation around them. Would you concur with that?
Yes, I think because this frontal cortex area of the brain is still developing, it's quite a chaotic time. There's a lot going on in that, and in the talk actually I liken it to a sort of whole series of country lanes which are going all over the places. You can take the wrong turning, you can get a dead end, you go the wrong way down a one-way street, and the whole time you're learning, and eventually those little country lanes will straighten up and become more like motorways or A roads. You can get from A to B a lot quicker. But during that very chaotic time where people are taking wrong turnings and learning from mistakes, it's very much a sort of me time. I think it's hard for adolescents to actually think outside of that and think about other people and have empathy for other people. So it is a distressing time in that it's everything's focused on themselves.
Yes, and sometimes the consequences of their behaviour can be quite puzzling to them because they haven't got the capacity to understand the consequences.
Yeah, definitely, I would agree with that.
So, as professionals, therapists or maybe someone working with children, what advice, what observations would you give someone when they're working with young people to take into consideration the fact that you're working with someone whose brain is developing? What kind of interactions are very useful in these cases?
Well, I think to have understanding is very, very important, to actually be able to empathize with that person, what is going on, to understand what's going on in their bodies and in their brains. And I think not to be judgmental, not to be prejudiced, to remember that everybody has been there. We've all been in this position of being a teenager, to feel that nobody understands them, nobody is going through what they're going through. And I think for us just to be there, and for the person themselves to know that you're there for them, and you're being empathetic, and you're being patient and non-judgmental. Sometimes easier said than done, maybe, because some behavior can be very, very challenging. But just to not judge,
Yes,
I think is important.
Yes, and I think there's something about the intersubjective side of any form of relationship with a young person, in that they're drawing from the more mature person, if you like, wisdom or a security that they may not be getting in the outside world. So I'm thinking, as a former school counsellor, I may have worked with children who's going through quite a difficult home life at the moment. And the consistency, being consistent as an adult, I think is important. Is that something you would say?
Absolutely. I mean, my main concern with young people was working as a specialist nurse in cystic fibrosis, and that involved working with a lot of young adolescents. And it's a very difficult time when you have a condition, a chronic condition, when you're going through adolescence, because you're trying to break away from the apron strings, your parents, who have possibly been overprotective in order to keep you as well as possible. And you're very conflicted, because you want to be like other people, you want to be like your friends, you want to be like your peer group. And it's a very, very difficult time. And I found as a carer for these people, it was very important for them just to know that I wasn't judging them. I was there. I was going to be there for them. I wasn't going to change my opinion of them. And I think not to sort of nag them too much either. I mean, they usually know that they're being challenging, and they're not always acting in the way that maybe we would want them to. But just to let them. I think it's important to learn from mistakes. And from my point of view, I definitely felt that for the patients I was looking after, it was important to let them make mistakes, because really that's the only way that you're going to learn.
Yes. Yes, and it's the old saying is you can't learn from other people's mistakes, you have to learn from your own.
Yeah.
It's about a lived experience.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that has been so useful. I've always said that if you're working and want to counsel young people, you do need an understanding of child development, and I think an understanding of how the child's brain works, because it does link to psychological contact and the way that you work with a young person. It's not easily, if you train to work with adults, it's not easily transferable when you're working with young people. No. So I think that's a fascinating insight. The lecture isn't to be missed. So Karen Griffiths, thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Karen Griffiths and to Rory for hosting that interview with Karen. It's important information. And as I was listening, I was thinking, you don't necessarily have to work with a teenage client group for this to apply to you. You can be working with any client who may have a teenage son, teenage daughter, who might be bringing that as part of their presentation. And I think having the information allows you to maybe empower the person that it's a very, very different place inside that teenage brain than it is within an adult brain.
Absolutely, Ken. And I think, we use the word teenage, so we might think, between the ages of kind of 13 and 19. But actually, recent neurological studies are showing that our brains don't form until we're 25. So it's very possible that adolescence actually extends into our mid-20s. So if you're working with adult clients, this interview may be useful to you as well. But we thank Karen for her skill, both as a therapist and as she said in the interview, she was a nurse. She was a nurse at one point, helping young people who've got serious illnesses. So she has a really, really rounded understanding of it. But I would say if anybody's interested in brain development, do some research, because more and more is becoming known about how our brains work and how it influences our behavior.
Of course, we're sharpening our competence all the time. If you're interested in hearing the full lecture on the teenage brain, that will be available in the Counsellor CPD library shortly. So that is in the process of being added as we speak. And if you're a member, you can log in and you will see the lecture there. If you're not a member, the Counselor CPD library is a provision of lectures on topics that we are likely to come across within our therapy rooms, delivered by top professionals who research and work within those areas, all mapped to learning outcomes, aims, objectives. So you're getting really thought out information that is actionable by you in your practice. We have hundreds and hundreds of hours of lectures for a really minimum annual price. And if you want information on that, go to counsellingtutor.com, and our CPD library information is all there for you.
Yeah, well, we've had quite an in-depth podcast today. We started with idiosyncratic empathy, hopefully sharing information with students who are doing their skills, or even qualified colleagues who may be interested in the more in-depth ideas of person-centered therapy. We also talked to Adrian Rhodes, who's the chair of ACTO, who shared with us what ACTO's about and the membership levels. And then finally, we talked to Karen Griffiths, understanding the teenage brain, and gave us an in-depth understanding of how teenage brains are constructed and the kind of behaviors that we may see that teenagers have. And I can remember that I was a teenager once, so there we go. So as always, stay grounded, stay safe, and join the digital counselling revolution.
If you're a qualified counsellor or psychotherapist, then why not check out the Counsellor CPD library? Stay current with your CPD requirements with over 150 hours of academically rigorous, on-demand lectures you can stream to your device. Joining Counselor CPD will expand your skill set to create a more specialised, highly rewarding practice. For more information on the Counselor CPD library, visit counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.